So someone pointed this out to me, that they thought that I might be interested in it. Chancellorsville. This is HistoryMarche. Yes. Chancellorsville, 1863, Robert E. Lee's greatest battle, American Civil War. I think this is the one where he split his troops in half. I think Spotsylvania. And I want to say this was right after Fredericksburg, or was Chancellorsville before Fredericksburg? I think this was after. I think Fredericksburg was a defeat or a retreat or something. I don't remember. There's so many battles. It's hard to keep track. Just a side note, this will be 2 videos, but you see this gentleman right here, and I've said it before in other Civil War videos. This is General Hooker. Hooker's men, they used to, they were, I guess, quite a rowdy bunch. Ooh, my foot. My foot. I got a cramp in my foot. And the one toe just instantly does this. It goes, and I got to stand up. So they used to, they were a rowdy bunch, and they used to spend their money. And they had a lot of women following them. And every time they would camp, Hooker allowed his men to partake with the women. And so after a while, more women would show up because they would make money that way. They might have lost a husband in the war and they needed money. And so they would start to go along and follow the... They would start to go... Sorry, I was reading names. They'd go along, and after a while, the ladies who followed were called Hooker's gals. And they were basic prostitutes. And eventually, prostitutes, as we know them, they were originally called Hooker's gals, and it was just shortened to hookers. And, you know, some people call them prostitutes, ladies of the evening, however you choose. But that's how the term hooker came about, is because ladies that were frequented by men were from General Hooker's division. That is a absolutely worthless piece of information. You're welcome. And let's get into this video. We're going to break it down. It'll be 2 18+ minute videos. So let's go. Let's not go. See, what I got to do is I got to click that. Now,
it is late April 1863. The American Civil War has now entered its 3rd year, and a stalemate has emerged in the Eastern Theater. Over the previous winter, Robert E. Lee, commander of the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia, had beaten back yet another Union bid to take Richmond at Fredericksburg. But now the Union has a new commander, General Hooker, popularly known by the sobriquet Fighting Joe. Under his leadership, the Army of the Potomac has stolen a march on the Confederates, crossed 2 rivers, and are beating down on Lee's left flank, preparing a killer blow. Outnumbered, and with the enemy closing in on 2 sides, Lee is trapped, and defeat or flight appear the only options. What happened next, however, was a series of ever more audacious maneuvers that would set the stage for the most dynamic battle of the American Civil War, and one that will ensure Lee's reputation as one of the great commanders of history.
I think that's a bit of a stretch to say he had a great, he's lucky it worked out kind of plan, but I don't think he was one of the all-time greats. I think that's a little too much praise. I'm kind of mixed on Lee. Growing up, I thought he was better than he was, and look, I'm not saying that he was the worst. I think reputation precedes him a bit and makes him seem better, just like some people might say about Grant, because Grant lost a lot of people. You know, he's called the Butcher. Okay. I can't... Oh... If Grant losing a lot of men makes him a bad general, okay. That's your opinion on the matter. A lot of people were going to die in this battle anyways, so that would pretty much make every general who fought, or military leader who fought, bad. It's not about that, though. Let's get into it.
For those of you who've been following my channel for a while, you must have heard me say that making videos can be very time-consuming. So I want to welcome back a returning sponsor, a service that I actually use to make... Go and check out this amazing service. Although Union forces made great gains in the spring and summer 1862, securing key points along the vital Mississippi River, occupying most of the border state of Tennessee, and coming within a few days' march of the rebel...
Sorry. I'm going to change the quality a little bit. See if it does any... Depends on what it looks like. We'll give it a try. Of course, yeah. My internet seems a little off today.
Capital at Richmond, they were unable to capitalize on them. Instead, the Confederacy demonstrated its own vigor by launching two separate offensives in the autumn, one into Maryland and the other into Kentucky. Both of these invasions were eventually pushed back. However, they revealed that the South was ready to take advantage of Northern supineness to press and threaten where best they could. In September 1862, emboldened by the Confederate withdrawal, U.S. President Abraham Lincoln released a draft of an Emancipation Proclamation to go into effect the coming January. This document will liberate all slaves in the states still in rebellion and make complete abolition the North's chief policy objective. Lincoln hoped that this gambit would place Southerners on the defensive philosophically for the remainder of the conflict. But Lincoln also knew that bold speech needed to be supported by bold action. 5 days after the midterm elections, which saw Democrats pick up seats in Congress, and frustrated by the Army of the Potomac's inactivity, Lincoln replaced its popular commander George McClellan with Ambrose Burnside. He hoped Burnside would bring on an engagement before year's end to take advantage of Northern superiority in numbers. A decisive defeat of Lee would yield important political dividends. Within days of taking command, Burnside aggressively moved south. He reached the Rappahannock River in late November. Unfortunately, logistical difficulties, namely acquiring enough pontoon boats to make sufficiently quick crossings, resulted in a delay of several weeks. This gave Lee plenty of time to maneuver his army into a strong defensive position along Murray's Heights, south and west of the city of Fredericksburg. By December 11th, Burnside had his boats and resumed the offensive, crossing the Rappahannock under fire, followed the next day by a series of direct assaults on Lee's position. The results were catastrophic. In the most lopsided engagement of the entire Civil War, the North left over 12,000 killed and wounded on the battlefield. Despite the disaster at Fredericksburg, Burnside thought he could still salvage the situation. The following month, he sought to move north around Lee's left flank, hoping to take advantage of the frozen ground to move more quickly and the correspondingly lower river levels to cross the Rappahannock at United States Ford, instead of needing to rely on pontoon boats. Burnside's maneuver would be covered both by a feint to the south and by the largest cavalry raid ever envisioned to the west, intended to circle Lee's army as well as Richmond before rejoining Union forces on the James Peninsula. Unusually warm weather on January 20th, the first day of operations, got the operation off to a promising start. But the weather stayed warm and rain came down instead of snow. The roads turned into sloughs, the riverbanks into marshes. General Lee, discerning the maneuver, sent detachments to oppose the crossing. With the casualties of Fredericksburg fresh in his mind, and with the river now rising amidst the
Okay, so Fredericksburg was first. Okay.
continual rain, Burnside had to pull back. 2 days later, he tendered his resignation to Lincoln, who replaced him with Joe Hooker.
So, real fast, let me go over... and by the way, I'm not trying to throw disrespect at Lee at all. I mean, you know, when I was saying earlier. I will say this. The first Union commander that you saw, George McClellan. Anybody ever seen Band of Brothers, the TV show? David Schwimmer, that's the actor who plays that guy. The guy he's playing, whoever that is, I can't even remember his name now. I watch it every year. Already forgot his name. McClellan is that type of guy. The only difference is that guy, his soldiers hated him. They almost got better in spite of him. They got better because they hated him so much they just wanted to be better than him. So McClellan, his men loved him. I would have probably loved him. He cared and loved his troops. He trained them well. He took care of them. I mean, he was a leader. His problem was on the I'll call it the parade grounds, the training grounds. The leader that he was there, the leader that he was there didn't translate to the leader on the field, the military guy on the field. And look, some people have it, some people don't. And that's, again, I'm not trying to take a shot at him for that. Sometimes you're good, great at something, and you want to do this, but it's just not in the books, you know. And McClellan wanted to be the number one, the top guy, and he should have been relegated. And this is Lincoln's fault too. He should have been left in charge of training his guys. Burnside, I don't know a whole lot from Burnside, but he seemed very, I'm going to go one step forward, 4 steps backwards, like very timid. But I'm not trying to bash him. It's just the little that I know of him. And Hooker's another one that I'm kind of back and forth on. I think he could have been decent, but there was always a fork in the road, so to speak. You know, which path are you going to take? The problem was he was always the one who put that fork in the road and then didn't know which path. Now he's created a problem and now he doesn't know which direction to go. That was kind of how I felt of Hooker. I could be wrong, but again, Hooker's another one that I don't know a whole lot about other than the Hooker's gals, which doesn't really tell you a whole lot about the way he is. But enough of my talking. I apologize.
Although recognized for solid performance in the Army's past 3 campaigns, Hooker's personality, ambitious and abrasive, did not endear him to his fellow officers. In fact, his own self-serving attitude may have led the generals to suspect the same spirit in his more enterprising subordinates such as Reynolds, Meade, and Sedgwick.
Clearly I know more about George Meade and I have a lot of respect for Meade. Reynolds is not ringing a bell, and Sedgwick isn't. The name is ringing a bell. I don't know every single one of these people, and the Civil War isn't something that I've really studied a whole lot. I just know a little bit here and there. I would like to get into it more, though. I think, I'm not trying to point a finger at another channel, but I think Vlogging Through History would probably have a better grasp on this type of thing, because this is something that he does.
The atmosphere Hooker created at headquarters was one of personal dependence, which, when combined with a commander's natural desire for secrecy, would have paralyzing consequences on the upcoming campaign. Confident where Burnside was self-critical, Hooker spent the rest of the winter bringing a similar spirit to an army that had been slogging through mud. He abolished the grand divisions and improved camp conditions.
Wait a minute. Is Chancellorsville where Jackson gets killed? Stonewall Jackson? Is this where he dies? I passed by the Chancellorsville exit in 2021, going back up to Mount Vernon for the third time. But I did not. Mount Vernon was more important, but I did not go off. But is this where he gets shot and killed by his own men on accident? Spotsylvania. Anyways.
With morale restored by the middle of February, Hooker turned to operations. Willing to take every possible advantage of his numerical superiority, Hooker sent 9th Corps under General Baldy Smith to make threatening maneuvers on the James Peninsula, the scene of last spring's offensive. Urged by Confederate President Jefferson Davis and confident in being able to recall them quickly, Lee countered by dispatching 1st Corps Commander James Longstreet, his aggressive divisional commanders John Bell Hood and George Pickett, and 13,000 men to guard the capital. Smaller forces were detached to protect the North Carolinian coast. Although the natural defense of Fredericksburg have proven their worth, Lee was left with about 60,000 men to confront Hooker's army of 130,000. There will be little margin for error. Informed that Lee had reduced his force, Hooker next sought to freeze his foe in place by moving aggressively along 3 separate fronts. Confident that the outnumbered Confederates could not stop all 3 at once, and gambling that Lee would not aggressively move against any of them until it was too late. First, Hooker dispatched Darius Couch, his only trusted subordinate, downstream with his 2nd Corps to turn the Confederate right. General Sedgwick with 3 Corps would push forward over the old pontoon bridges at Fredericksburg and threaten Marye's Heights. Hooker himself would command the remaining 3 infantry corps and all of the Army's cavalry on a flanking maneuver to the west.
I think Marye Heights, yeah, this might be the battle. Marye Heights now has a statue of, is his name Richard Rowland Kirkland? He was 19 at the time, Confederate soldier. After the first, they might get into it if I'm thinking the right battle. After the first night battle, he heard a lot of people moaning on both sides, in the battlefield, and he jumped over and he started running over and giving all the wounded, whether they're Confederate or Union, water. And Union soldiers saw movement on the field, so they got their guns drawn and they're ready to shoot him. And then the Confederates are like, "What are you doing, dude?" So they got their guns pointed at the Union side, And once the Union realized what he was doing, they were throwing canteens filled with water out onto the battlefield. You know, here you go. And he would pick them up and give them water, and then he would toss them back. And Confederates were doing that too. And he ran around. I don't know how long he did it. He ran around for quite a while, helping every single soldier. I don't know if it was every single one, but he did not pick sides. He helped everyone. Then he jumped back over to his side and he cried all night long. Unfortunately, that 19 or 20-year-old kid died at the age of 21 at the Battle of Chickamauga. So some people just are just good, you know, and they deserve the afterlife. They deserve the best that's available for their actions.
Replicated Burnside's doomed mud march. Lee would either be forced to evacuate his strong position or to give battle on 3 sides that would surely end in a decisive defeat. By mid-April, the Army of the Potomac was ready to move. On the 13th, General Stoneman and 10,000 cavalry headed north and west along the banks of the Rappahannock. Anticipating hard riding in the near future and not wanting to tire his mounts, Stoneman adopted a slow pace. It proved an unfortunate decision. That night marked the beginning of an intense spring rainfall that continued over the next few days. Within a few hours, the Rappahannock had risen, and fording at any point became impractical for a fortnight. Undaunted by... It is late April 1863.
I don't know what just happened. I'm not quite sure. So... I have no idea what happened. Okay, we're going back here. My apologies. Okay, let's play.
Fortnight. Undaunted by the delay, on April 27th, a confident Hooker began his march, taking 70...
A confident Hooker. That's what I like. Sorry, you may not find that little slip there funny, but I did.
1,000 men, 5th Corps under Meade, 11th Corps under Howard, and 12th Corps under Slocum, and reaching Kelly's Ford late the following evening. Union skirmishers quickly drove off the outnumbered Confederate pickets and crossed the river all through the night and into the next day. By late afternoon on the 29th, lead detachments from 11th and 12th Corps had passed the Rapidan, repelling patrols of Jeb Stuart's cavalry along the Orange Turnpike. 5th Corps now moved aggressively to the east, driving away skirmishers under Confederate Generals Mahone and Posey, and uncovering Ely's, Todd's, and United States fords. Meanwhile, Generals Couch and Sedgwick did their part to support Hooker's flanking maneuver. The former moved his 2nd Corps and probed a crossing of the Rappahannock below Fredericksburg, while the latter advanced half of his 1st, 3rd, and 6th Corps across the old pontoon bridges into the town itself. Confronted with this direct show of force, and with conflicting reports about the rest of the Union Army, Lee held his position. It appeared that Hooker's assessment of his opponent was correct. His aggressive strategy was working. Late on the night of the 29th, however, Lee received insurmountable evidence that Hooker was threatening his left with a force larger than that of his entire army. Eager to maintain his position as long as possible, the Confederate general decided to match Hooker's boldness with an even riskier gamble. Lee knew he could not contend with numbers. His only hope was to take advantage of the terrain in the wilderness, a dense mass of secondary growth forest, transected by a few narrow dirt roads, the Orange Turnpike, and the Orange Plank Road. Maneuvering in this area would be incredibly difficult. Unit cohesion could quickly be lost, along with one's sense of direction. Lee dispatched the remaining brigades of Richard Anderson's divisions westward to meet Mahone and Posey and form a makeshift defensive line across the Orange Plank Road at Zone Church. He ordered Thomas Stonewall Jackson and his 2nd Corps to slide into position opposite Fredericksburg. Lastly, he sent a telegram to Longstreet to return post-haste. Both sides spent the soggy April 30th maneuvering, the Confederates desperately, the Union deliberately. Encouraged by his success, the ever-confident Hooker ordered a consolidation at Chancellorsville, a 2-story brick house at the intersection of the Orange Plank Road and the Orange Turnpike. Hooker also ordered Sedgwick to send Couch's 2nd Corps and General Dan Sickles' 3rd Corps across the newly opened fords to reinforce the Union right while continuing his crossing with the rest of 1st and 6th Corps. "I have Lee in one hand and Richmond in the other," Hooker remarked encouragingly. By 11 a.m., advance units of 5th Corps had occupied the Chancellor House, and General Meade eagerly sent skirmishers down the Orange Turnpike. But Hooker countermanded this decision, opting to wait for Couch and Sickles before moving again. Although he had received intelligence about enemy troops along the turnpike, Hooker knew Lee could not possibly have the numbers to challenge him. He could afford to wait and gather strength. General Lee spent most of the day gauging how few men he can leave to bluff Sedgwick into staying passive. General Lafayette McLaws' division had already been sent to reinforce General Anderson, and Jackson's 2nd Corps had been primed to move before the next dawn. Only Barksdale's brigade from Longstreet's 1st Corps and Early's division from Jackson's 2nd Corps would hold the front on Marye's Heights. Lee was aware that only a quick strike would disorient Hooker and recapture operational initiative, yet equally aware that he had nowhere near the numbers needed for such a strike. Greater risks still needed to be.
You're almost, if you're Lee, I would be thinking, I want to strike fast and run. Strike and run. I don't, small units, attack, try not to get hit, clearly. And I'm not breaking ground on this one. I shouldn't even have had to have said it. I'm stupid. Try to take 1 or 2 people down and get the hell out of there. Just run. They might not chase, or if they do, they'll chase for a little bit and then they'll stop. But I also understand, with this terrain, all the woods, you have an advantage by staying in it. So, disregard what I said, because I apparently don't know what I'm doing. You guys want to join my military? I guarantee you'll die.
Taken. As dawn broke over a drier May 1st morning, both army commanders ordered their men forward. Hooker dispatched a portion of Meade's 5th Corps north along the river road to open up Banks Ford, while another detachment under General Sykes was to push along the turnpike towards Fredericksburg. Meade would be supported by Slocum's 12th Corps pushing south and east along the Plank Road. Howard's 11th Corps, composed of less reliable men, were to secure the crossroads out towards the Wilderness Church and await General Couch's 2nd Corps and Sickles' 3rd Corps. On the Confederate side, the energetic Stonewall Jackson began moving even earlier. By 8 a.m., 3 of his 4 divisions were well on their way, marching along both the Turnpike and the Orange Plank Road. By 11 a.m., he met up with McLaws and Anderson and ordered them to abandon their defensive works and to push westward. Jackson understood his army's dilemma as well as Lee and hoped to give his commander the luxuries of time and space to consider all viable options, even a withdrawal southwards. A confrontation was not long in coming. Within a half hour after setting out, Confederate skirmishers opened fire against Meade and Slocum's forces along the turnpike and the Plank Road. Although Meade's men continued unimpeded along the river road, Jackson's audacious confrontation in his center gave Hooker reason to pause. According to the commander's own account of the battle later, it was at this moment that Hooker lost faith in Hooker. At 1 p.m., with elements of the Union Army within distance of Banks Ford, Hooker gave the order to fall back to their morning positions. Baffled and enraged, Meade and Slocum felt they had no choice but to accept. Around midnight, Lee and Jackson held a conference in the woods. Although satisfied they had slowed Hooker, neither were sure about how best to proceed. Shortly afterwards, Lee's cavalry commander, Jeb Stuart, rode up with two valuable pieces of information. First, an overconfident Howard had permitted 11th Corps to set up without properly protecting their flank west of Wilderness Church along the Plank Road. Second, a local resident indicated the presence of a little-used path that could take the Confederates across the Union front to attack the vulnerable flank, using the dense foliage of the wilderness as a cover.
We're going to stop it right there. The lead up to the battle. And we will jump back in. I know it's a little bit longer, but I wanted to go ahead and get that in. So, yeah, once Hooker loses confidence in himself, I mean, it's not good. So we're going to end it here. There's a thanks button. You can donate to the channel. You don't have to. Subscribe if you've watched a few of my videos and something you like. Just subscribe. Thumbs up. That helps a lot. And for everything else, you just have a good day. Have a good night.